Welcome back to Stef ABtv, and in today's video we've got the brand new BMW M3, the G82 model, and we are going to be talking about this car. We're going to drive it, we're going to compare it to the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, and I'm going to tell you which one I prefer, the new M3 Comp or the Giulia Quadrifoglio. I have been a massive fan of the Giulia Quadrifoglio for a very long time. I've driven so many of those. In fact, I'm very accustomed to how that car drives. And there's been a lot of hype about the new G80 M3, and for a good reason, I guess, because it is a huge leap forward in terms of technology from BMW in comparison to the F80. But is it all it's lived up to be? And that's what we're going to find out today, and whether I prefer this over the Giulia Quadrifoglio. Now that's a big thing for me to answer that question, but I will honestly tell you by the end of this video which one I prefer. First things first, what do we get in this new BMW M3 Competition? Well, important to note, in the UK, they are only shipping out M3 Comp. They're going straight for the 503 bhp competition package, which is what we're driving today in this gorgeous Isle of Man green. BMW have also just announced the dates for the xDrive M3 Comp, but this one we're in right now is pure rear-wheel drive. We've got some nice Michelin tyres on here, so it gives us a good chance to test the 0 to 62, which is effectively stamped on the book at 3.9 seconds, so identical to that of the Giulia QV. Let's see how it puts this power down. Definitely shifts, that's for sure. This thing does shift. It dances around a little bit, but you would expect that from a 503 bhp car, and that's brilliant because the road ahead is just closed. Phenomenal. I guess we're going this way now. Now, how did that feel? That felt flipping good, I'll tell you that. Yeah, this has got phenomenal torque. Does it feel better than the Giulia QV? I wouldn't say it does, but I can tell you one thing, the way this S58 engine dumps that torque down, wow, yeah, that's solid. What you do get in this, you get obviously from 503 bhp, but you also get so much of that peak power being dumped down at around about 2,500 RPM. So actually it feels a little bit less, I guess, a little bit less laggy than the Giulia QV. One of the things that I find with the Giulia is that it's kind of nothing everything, particularly in first, whereas this feels like it's dumping the power down that little bit earlier, which helps with the traction through the rear wheels, because the Giulia is just 100% dump, whereas this, it feels like it's releasing that power a little bit more progressively, which makes it a little bit more drivable. Then again, it is nice and warm outside, and we've probably got some nice heat in the tyres, so take that with a pinch of salt. This in the wet will be a very different kettle of fish. Even though BMW have got like a 10-stage traction control on this car, which is a really good thing because it allows you to kind of get to grips with the M3 without going full-on crazy race mode, which is what you get in the Quadrifoglio. With the Giulia, it's very much you give it a go, you mess it up, you die. In the M3, it's more, you give it a little go. Cool, you've leveled up, you're now on level 2. And that's kind of the way you go until you get to all traction control removed. And you also have, of course, the MDM modes on these, which is just a brilliant thing. It inspires a whole load more confidence. It will allow you to send the car sideways, but the power will cut out if it clocks over. I think it's like 45-degree worth of slide. I'm not sure, I need to double check that. But anyway, let's talk about the color and the styling. Now, I really like this car. I like the styling, I like the look of this car from every angle other than the front. And I'll be honest, I do not like the front of this car. And I don't know whether it's just because of how taken back I was when I first saw the press shots and I see that grille, and it just doesn't do it for me, versus something like the Giulia QV, which is just stunning. But I do like the road presence on this. I do like the design language. I do like the sharp lines this car has, particularly at the rear. And of course, that is accentuated by things such as the carbon pack, which we'll touch on in a moment, because that's a 6,700, oh, in fact, we'll touch on it now. It's a 6,700 pound optional extra. And with the carbon pack, you get these amazing seats. These ones are in a kind of Silverstone and black trim, which are incredible. You get full carbon buckets on these. You get the front carbon axles and the rear carbon rear spoiler and diffuser. So you do get a lot for that. And there's a question around whether that should be an essential mod for you. And I'm going to touch on that shortly, because whilst these seats are incredible, I'm not necessarily sure that you will love them if you are daily driving this car. I will say this car does shift. It is quick. Yeah, it's very quick, guys. Very, very quick. Now, interestingly, with the new M3 and M4 competitions, what they've done is they've ditched the brilliant DCT box. Now, for some, that's a bit of a disappointment, myself included. I love that DCT box. Now, BMW say the reason they've done this is because, as just recently announced, you have the X-Drive platforms. And the automated box with torque converter is what's needed effectively to be able to run the four-wheel drive system, which I guess makes sense. But there's an argument for me to say, do you even need a four-wheel drive M3? Is that like sacrilege, you know, the ultimate driving machine, the M3, to be four-wheel drive or X-Drive? Yeah, I'm not so sure. I think this as a rear-wheel drive platform is plenty. The grip that you get on this car is very, very good. It's very good. Yes, of course, you know, you can fully send it and you'll be, you know, drifting around every corner possible. I mean, this car even has a drift meter. The other thing that I would say, and I'm comparing this to the Giulia Quadrifoglio, I mean, just because I was stuck in traffic before turning the cameras back on, I counted 82 buttons in front of me. That's very busy. Now, I know the Giulia Quadrifoglio has always been criticised for being a bit too basic inside. But dare I say that cars of today are becoming a bit too advanced. I mean, when am I ever going to press 82 buttons? I mean, sure, every single one of them has a purpose, and I'm pretty certain that every single one of them is great, and BMW put them all there for a reason. But it creates this kind of very busy cabin for the driver. And whilst I love this car, and as a driver, like the way I'm seated right now, it's phenomenal. It's great. It is an interesting viewpoint, to say the least, when you've got so many buttons. Now, this S58 engine first found its life in the X3M. That's kind of where it was debuted, if you like, and now it's found its way into the M3 and the M4. And I'll tell you what, one thing I am mega impressed with on this car is its acceleration, how well it puts the power down. And I can feel that back slipping, but it's so compliant. This kind of moves me on to my next point, and again, comparing it to the Giulia QV, if my seatbelt wants to let me go. No? Guess we're stuck. The steering feel itself, yes, you've got different modes of steering, but it's definitely nowhere near as direct as that on the Giulia QV. There's an element of numbness, and that's really bad to say. And I'm not going to, in fact, it's not numbness. I don't necessarily have as much feedback through the steering wheel as I would from the Giulia QV. But at the same time, it doesn't take anything away from this. It just proves that the Giulia Quadrifoglio steering setup is just so good, and it still is that good. Even with this car coming out and the Giulia Quadrifoglio itself being, I mean, really now a relatively dated platform, because model year 20 cars are out, but they're not necessarily doing anything other than a couple of tail lights and some interior bits and bobs, whereas this, a completely new platform of that of the F80 M3, and whilst it's, for me, very, very much a superior car, it definitely isn't as sharp, for me anyway, in steering as the Giulia QV. Now, the other bit as well, obviously, is sound. Now, the Giulia Quadrifoglio has, you know, in race mode, the exhausts open up. It has a delicious sound. That V6 engine, it sounds really, really nice. Whereas this, being that 3-litre straight six, still sounds good. But you can tell that it's being choked up because of Euro emissions, and obviously that's something we'll never get away from. But somehow Alfa still managed to eke in a little bit more sound, and BMW have pumped in a lot more into the cabin. The other thing as well are these paddles. I really like these paddles. These paddles are kind of carbon fiber. They feel really nice. They're attached to the steering column, the steering wheel itself, as opposed to the steering column, where the Giulia Quadrifoglio has much larger aluminium paddles. And whilst the Giulia Quadrifoglio paddles feel a little bit nicer to click, I'm not going to give any bad press to these, because they also feel very, very good, and they look great in carbon fiber too. Now, the other thing that I really love about BMWs, and again, this is something that Alfa, they should work towards, in my opinion, but is the beautiful M2, M1 buttons, the M mode buttons, which are complete custom configurations. Because right now I'm in M2, which is kind of your aggressive setup. The gearbox is set to really harsh. Each gear change is like a thunderous thump to the back of me. Whereas with the Giulia Quadrifoglio, it's once you're in race, that is it. You know, Alfa turned around and said, this is what you're getting, like it or not. If you mess a corner up, you're flying into a ditch. Whereas BMW and Ford, you know, we'll give you options, man. We'll give you loads of options, because that's what we do at BMW. We give you options. The Italians, they just give you what they want to give you. But that leads me on to this other kind of different kind of characteristics that this car has. If I take it out of the M2 mode and put it straight into drive and comfort, this is where this car excels, in my opinion, because the Giulia Quadrifoglio, whilst it is very compliant, it still has relatively harsh suspension. And because the Giulia Quadrifoglio is a lighter car, it's also got aluminium and composite panels and carbon fiber. You feel the road noise a bit more. The BMW M3 Competition, on the other hand, it's coming in close to 1,800 kilos, so it's a heavy old thing, but it does disguise its weight pretty well, I have to admit. For an 1,800 kilo car, you can still really throw this thing around, and I do like that. However, what that means is I get a really nice, comfortable drive, you know, on a motorway. This will be brilliant, and the QV still will be good, but I think this would trump that. It really is a really good car, though. I know I'm doing a direct comparison to the Quadrifoglio, and the Quadrifoglio has always been one of my favorite cars in terms of a driver's package anyway. I don't think there are many cars out there, even with this coming out, if I'm honest, that deliver what the QV does. I think the Quadrifoglio is still up there with, in fact, I would argue that as a driver's car, if that's all you're looking at, whilst this is still brilliant, I still think the Giulia Quadrifoglio, for me, in my opinion, is the better driver's car. And I know that that's going to probably destroy the internet, and people are going to go, oh my God, but the G80 M3 is just amazing. And it is. I have to stress that. This is a brilliant car. Incredible power, brilliant mid-range torque, sound is muted, the handling on this is great, but I just prefer the QV in terms of a performance driver's car. Now, what about everyday use? Because that's where it becomes important. You're not just going to use this on a track, etc. You're not just going to have this in race, in MDM or traction control off all the time, or M2. You're going to use it normally. You know, in terms of, still brilliant. In terms of the everyday use, I think I prefer this. Being brutally honest, I think I prefer this car to the Giulia Quadrifoglio, because you have the element of comfort, the luxury. You get the operating system 7, which is so much more superior to the widget system that Alfa Romeo have put into the model year 20. I mean, it's a good effort, but it's not great. You know, it's much better than what they had in the Gen 1 car. But this operating system 7 is just leagues ahead, leagues ahead. And it is fun, this car. It's very, very fun. The other thing that I love about this as well, you know, you get these seats here, whilst they are £6,500 worth of optional extra, which coupled with the carbon pack and the front carbon inserts for the air vents, you do also get a nice element of premium in this car, as you would expect from BMW. I've got a very nice kind of virtual cockpit style in the middle, which is very nice, customizable. I've got a very good head-up display as well, which is very clear, very big. In terms of price, this car starts from £72,000. You know, similar, slightly over on the QV. When you start to chuck the options in, you do end up hiking the price up. This has got about 12 grand's worth of optional extras in here, which you'd expect from a UK press car, because when they give it to idiots like me and YouTubers to showcase, they want me to showcase to you the best of the best, which means you'll go to a configurator, you'll say, oh, I really like those seats, and then realize you've got to spank 6.5 grand to get them. On a final note, you can also go all in and spec in the carbon ceramics on this car, which will make your eyes water because they cost 8 grand. Do I think you need them? If you're aggressively using this on a track, then yes, I think there's a benefit to getting the carbon ceramics. But the brakes on this thing are brilliant. You know, this is an 1,800 kilo car and it stops very, very well. So kind of what's my final thoughts? What's my verdict on this stunning, well, 75% stunning M3 Competition? Look, I love this thing. I really love this thing. Would I pay 86,000 for one personally? I wouldn't. If I was to pick one specifically for driving, like performance driving characteristics, I think I would take the Giulia. The Giulia for me just feels a little bit more nimble. It feels a bit lighter on its feet. Whilst the front end on this is great, you know, you can literally point and shoot as well. For me, the Giulia wins in that department. Steering, the Giulia for me feels better than the M3 Comp on a steering perspective. Now, it doesn't mean the M3 is not good. As I said earlier on, the Giulia for me is just more superior. Styling, I think that the Giulia for me has more of an elegant look. This has a bit more of a, I'm German and I've got big wide body panels, but it looks great. I just think the Giulia looks nicer. For me, I think the Giulia still is the better car. Flame me in the comments, go for it.